This is Broad Radio. For you, by you. Broad Radio. Here for more.
Good morning and welcome to Broad Radio. My name is Jo Stanley and my co-host this morning is the delightful Ange Pipos. Hi there, Angela, I should say.
You can call me Ange. Hi, Joanne.
Oh my God. It's like our mothers are in the house. It's so lovely to see you, Ange. And we have a really great show for you this morning. I'm really looking forward to all three of our guests. We're going to be talking endometriosis. Now, we know that women who live with endometriosis are often unheard, overlooked, and can have all areas of their life really seriously impacted by this debilitating disease. So this morning we're going to speak with Professor Peter Rogers, who is from Jean Hales for Women's Health. He is also Director of Research at the Royal Women's Hospital in Melbourne and Professor of Women's Health Research at University of Melbourne. He has a million hats. He's going to be talking to us about new research into endometriosis. Also comedian and founder of Sheba. And I hope that you have used Sheba, by the way, George. It's a female-only rideshare. Oh, sorry. What's your name, Ange? I've got confused.
Look, I would like to be George. George is a woman who knows how to get shit done. Like
Yes.
She's got 4 kids, runs her own business, and she's very funny.
She is. So
Who wouldn't want to be George?
We're talking about George McEncroe, and she is going to be joining us to talk about courage, how you have the courage to set up a business like Sheba, which has been extraordinarily successful, and also the challenge of living with adult children, which is a whole other courageous thing I'm discovering. And later on in the show, we meet Broad Radio listener Bronwyn Jackson, who is a funeral director, helping us talk about death in ways that are not just useful, but even beautiful. I'm really looking forward to that conversation. And that's all starting after this. Broad Radio is proudly supported by Chemist Warehouse. Chemist Warehouse, great savings every day. So, Ange, gorgeous to see you again. Before we get into all of the fun stuff, just a bit of housekeeping. If you are watching on YouTube, we'd love it if you would like and subscribe. If you're watching on Facebook, like and follow. Please comment, tell us what you're thinking, you're feeling. We really love it when you join the conversation. Of course, you can catch up later at any time. All of our episodes are on podcast now, Broad Radio on the go. You can catch up with those episodes wherever you get your podcasts. And we love it when you join our More to Say survey. Now, we have some fantastic giveaways attached to our More to Say poll. We love hearing your opinions. And in the last week, actually, we've been running this great giveaway for Mother's Day. We say a huge thank you to Saba Organics, one of the world's only 100% certified organic range of skincare and body care. They were kind enough to treat 3 beautiful women who nominated mums in their lives for our Mother's Day giveaway. And gosh, we heard some gorgeous stories about mums who raised children on their own, mother-in-laws who are always there for their family, cooking for 20 people, mums who have been battling cancer, mums who are out there working 4 jobs. And oh my gosh, Ange, mums are incredible.
Backbone of the country.
Absolutely, they really are. So congratulations to our winner. Make sure you enter this week's More to Say poll. It is 1 question and it's a really fun one. Let me find it. I've got to tell you what it is because Ro, you wrote this. Ro's our beautiful producer here. Oh, okay. So the weather is getting colder. And in the interest of keeping warm, how far do you drop your sartorial standards, Ange? A, I don't. I wear discreet, pretty thermals and stylish coats. B, slightly slippy, Uggs and Oodies inside the home only. Or, no shame, I will wear my onesies and slippers to the shops.
I'm a classic B. Anything goes inside the house, but I won't go to the shops in trackies and Ugg boots. No,
Are you serious?
never.
Really? Oh my God.
Nope.
You would
What
be
are you,
ashamed.
ABC?
Oh, C. I'll just go the only thing that matters to me is warmth. I have been known to walk the streets of my very suburban area in what could only be described as, well, like I live on the moors. Like I've got gumboots, I've got a raincoat, I just like,
Actually, that's true. I have seen you in the streets. Yes, this is. I can confirm that Joe will wear anything.
just because I'm so cold all the time. Well, I'm impressed, Ange. You wouldn't want to be out seen with me. Well, make sure you head along to broadradio.com.au and enter our More to Say poll. It's just one question and you go in the running to win some beautiful Saba Organics products yourself. Now, how was your Mother's Day, Ange?
It was great. It was all about me. So it was a fantastic day. Very sort of low key. It started with the presents in bed, the grade 2 art class style presents, which was nice, cup of tea. But then Francis organised a treasure hunt for me inside the house with little clues that were sort of dotted throughout. And then I ended up in the dining area with a beautiful orchid in the middle of the table and a lovely note. So it was great. And then I did what I should do more often, and I don't think I'm that good at relaxing. Really, I'm sort of so hyped up all the time, but I listen to a podcast while soaking in the bath, and that is something that it was so good, and I never do it. And it was Desert Island Discs, the Martina Navratilova one. I don't know whether you've heard her interview on that podcast. It was fantastic. You know, she talked about her life before she went to the States and just, about coming out in the world of sport and how, challenging all of that was. Just a great interview. And then I finished off after dinner with a feminist documentary. So I had had a fantastic day. It was really good. Really, really lovely.
But
how about you?
Well, I took my daughter to her footy game, and then I went out to my sister's house and we treated my mum with some high tea, which is really beautiful, and spent some family time. So it was really gorgeous. But I think it's lovely that you spent the day in the bath, or not the whole day, but some time in the bath. But how often do we get to do that as mothers? And I wanted to raise this. The reason Mother's Day is so important is because the fact is that women do the lion's share of the domestic labour around the house. I'm quoting the 2016 census that tells us the average woman spends between 5 and 14 hours a week in domestic labour, blokes less than 5 hours a week. So, the Mother's Day is more than just a token day to say thank you so much, mums, because it just, we need more acknowledgement of the work and some redressing of that imbalance.
Absolutely. And women have made such great strides in the workforce with, breaking down barriers in those occupations that have been traditionally male dominated, and law, finance, sport, all of that. But it seems like the home is really hard to shift attitudes inside the home, because women are doing double the amount of that domestic unpaid caring work and cleaning. So I would like to see, I don't know, some sort of campaign or some sort of awareness about it.
But Ange, it comes down to us individually, right? And all of us would say, and I say this about my husband, he's amazing. He does incredible support, and he really is very engaged and active around the house. But I wouldn't say he would do 50%. And I've got this list from Pip Lincoln's latest book. She's incredible. We must get her on the show in coming weeks. She's made a list of the unseen work of family life. And when you look at it and you read it, you're like, oh, yeah, okay, hang on a minute. It's things like healthy meal planning. I do all that. My husband doesn't do that. It's things like researching schools. Yeah, I instigated all of that. It's things like being the primary contact for childcare and school. How often do they call you over your partner? The school always calls me first.
Yes, same. But all the correspondence comes to me. Really, you're right. I should have given the 2 email addresses. They should both be there. On the school WhatsApp group, it's mostly the mothers who are responding to that. If one of the dads pops up in the WhatsApp group, I almost die of shock.
I know, it's like there's something
it's so
wrong.
Rare.
Is someone sick? That's what I think. So, but this is what I mean, right? The gender equality obviously starts in the home, and even though maybe the men in the house are pulling their weight as much as they can, it's that kind of system where everything is about the management of the house that falls to the women. And this leads me to our budget tonight, and the fact that there's going to be an overhaul of childcare, we're told. But it's all the conversation around it is what that means for women. and women returning to work. Childcare isn't just a woman's benefit, it's the family benefit.
All these things do, they reinforce old stereotypes. It's constantly reinforcing stereotypes, and that's why it is hard to shift. You can change laws and all of that, but you've got to change attitudes with it. Otherwise, it just doesn't work.
Yeah, that's right. So anyway, we're doing our best. We're doing our best. Geez. Actually, I want to make mention that our beautiful producer says my husband does more of the household work, but women shoulder the mental load in a lot of the ways. So
the emotional.
Yeah. Anyway, looking forward to the budget this evening and really understanding what is going to be in it. For women, we know an overhaul of childcare has been promised to us. There also has been a provision for women's health in the budget this evening, including funding for endometriosis, which is quite new. I believe this is on top of an announcement of funding for research into endometriosis that was made last year. It's extraordinary that this disease is finally being recognised, and what great progress that is. It's all welcome news. And to talk more about it, we have a man who has 1,000 hats, and I better get them right. His name is Professor Peter Rogers from Jean Hales for Women's Health. He is Director of Research at the Royal Women's Hospital in Melbourne, and he is Professor for Women's Health Research at University of Melbourne. And we're really thrilled to have him on Broad Radio. Good morning, Peter.
Good morning, Jo. And sorry, good morning. What do I say, Ange?
Ange is good. Thanks, Pete.
I didn't want to make a thing about it. Yeah, we're Pete, Jo and Ange this morning.
I'm happy to be Pete, by the way, yes.
Pete, you're leading the research group with 11 other organisations into this really important research for endometriosis. But can you clarify what is currently being spoken about in tonight's budget, which is $21.6 million going towards women's health initiatives, including education and pain management for endometriosis? That's in addition to what was promised last year for research?
That's my understanding. I've only seen a press release, so I'm not. The budget's not been formally announced, but absolutely, there's a number of initiatives that were developed as part of the National Action Plan for Endometriosis, which was published in July 2018, and increased funding for research is one of those, and that came to fruition, or that was announced a year ago, and this is some more initiatives. Oh, for heaven's sake!
Pete, tell them that you're on the radio.
Sorry, I should have silenced that. I was very, very poor. It's now dead.
That's okay.
It happens to the best of us, Peter.
It really does. Pete, can you give us just a really brief explanation of what endometriosis is? Because I know women who experience it are fully across it, but perhaps if we don't actually suffer from it ourselves, we might not fully understand what it is.
So there's a relatively tight definition for endometriosis, but there's a whole range of other issues that are related, which are causing a lot of the problems. But endometriosis itself, so the uterus sheds its lining every month. So during menstruation, the wall of the uterus breaks down, and 99% of that exits the body through the vagina, but a small percentage of it travels in the reverse direction, up the fallopian tubes and into the abdomen, into the peritoneal cavity, around the ovaries and around the uterus. And in but in roughly 10% of women, those cells are still alive, and they can attach to the walls of your to the surface of your ovary, to the fallopian tubes, to your gut, and to the walls of your abdominal cavity, and start to grow. And they form little clumps of cells that behave a bit like the wall of the uterus. So they become inflamed, they can bleed, they don't all bleed. And then a whole lot of other things, because there's inflammation going on, a whole lot of other things start to happen, including nerve fibers grow into them, and you start to get pain, often initially around the time of menstruation, but then that can get worse and can become chronic pain or permanent pain. So it's an insidious disease. It develops slowly. A lot of people don't know they've got it. A lot of women don't know they've got it. But ultimately, for the people who suffer from it, it's life destroying.
And Pete, I read that the average wait time for diagnosis can be between 7 and 10 years. You were just saying that many women don't know they've got it. Why does it take so long to diagnose it?
So there's a number of reasons. One of them is that in a lot of women it starts very young, so it can start pretty much at the time of your first menstruation. And at the moment, the only definite way to diagnose it is with an operation called a laparoscopy, where a fibre optic is put through the wall of the abdomen, and the surgeon actually inspects the inside to see what's happening. And understandably and reasonably as well, the clinicians are very reluctant to do those operations on young girls who are just starting to menstruate. And the difficulty we have, and part of the research that we've got going, is that most of the symptoms of endometriosis can occur, so the pelvic pain and the painful periods and so on can occur for other reasons than endometriosis. And often they can be temporary, and they can settle down again. So it's a real dilemma, even ignoring women who might go to a clinician who's not very knowledgeable about endometriosis, assuming they go to a clinician that really knows a lot about endometriosis and picks the best treatment options for them. They can still end up deciding that it's safer and better to wait rather than go through the risk of a surgery, which may not be necessary.
Do you think that there is, in some instances, a problem around women actually being heard and understood when they do seek help with their GPs or whatever medical professional they go to,
definitely,
when they're experiencing this kind of pain?
Definitely. Yeah, definitely. So as always, it depends on the expertise of the clinical people that they go to see. And so at the women's, we have a specialist clinic with people who pretty much, that's all they do. And so that obviously, they're very tuned into that. But if you're part of a GP in a rural practice that's having to deal with everything, I'm not trying to make excuses, but you can see that in that sort of a situation, the person may not be, the clinical person may not have the expertise that you'd hope to find perhaps in a more specialised centre.
Peter, many of the women I know who suffer from this condition have said that they've been fighting it on two fronts, both the physical and mental pain that goes with it, but also just to be respected by the medical profession. They felt like that's been quite a big obstacle to overcome as well. Do you think this significant investment that we're seeing from federal government and also with the projects you're working on is a signal that there has been a shift in thinking about endo? Absolutely.
And it couldn't come soon enough. So the whole getting endo onto the political agenda occurred through consumer advocacy. So there's consumer advocate groups across Australia. The Queensland group. There's two in New South Wales. There's people in Adelaide, people in Canberra. The Victorian group is actually there's a couple of smaller groups in Victoria, but the Victorian-wide group actually is in relapse, I suppose would be the way to put it. And they, with the help of some parliamentarians, really raised the profile of endometriosis and the problems with the health minister, with Greg Hunt, back in probably about 2017. That resulted in a national action plan, which becomes, I guess, a policy document. And now funding is being allocated to various components of that document to make them happen. So I think Australia in some ways is almost leading the world in terms of recognising the importance of or the problems associated with endometriosis and the associated, what I should say is that the two main symptoms of endometriosis, which are pelvic or pain and infertility, which have a number of other causes as well, are very much on the agenda, and I think that's just great. It's really important because I don't know. We've had a system in the past in Australia where unless people are dying from a particular thing, then it's not important, and a bit of pain and suffering wasn't enough to get it onto the agenda.
Well, I mean, you mentioned the National Action Plan for Endometriosis that the Australian Government Department of Health released a couple of years ago, and I was reading that, and even I learned something because it said myth. Period pain is normal, you must have a low pain threshold. Fact, severe pain with menstruation is not normal. I never knew that. I always assumed and had been told all my life that you should just accept this and you just suck it up as a part of being a woman. So I feel like we're not even teaching our girls to listen to their bodies and be advocates for themselves.
And that's what, so we started talking about the more money in the budget tonight, and part of that is for a schools program.
Right.
So that the next generation doesn't end up with the same myths embedded in them, and also making sure that I was listening to you discussing the role of males as well in society earlier. It's really important that the boys know about this stuff as well. I mean, it's the whole family that's affected. It's the whole everybody. If any single member of a family is unwell, it influences the lives of the whole family, and everybody needs to buy into that.
And also, I would imagine employers, because women I've spoken to over the years have said that this stops them from working, from being able to go to work for a week or so every month. And, is there enough awareness in that community with the problem?
No. And it's a huge economic impact. But as I said, speaking as a researcher who's worked on, I guess, the endometrium and problems associated with, either fertility and pain and so on for many, many years, there has been an absolute massive change in thinking about support for this area. It really was almost impossible to get funding for this sort of work 20 years ago. And that's changed now very, very dramatically and for the better.
So can you tell us a little about the research that has been funded by the federal government that you're a part of, and in fact that you're heading up into endometriosis?
Sure. So the project is the title for the project is Improving Diagnosis and Treatment of Endometriosis. It's actually a suite of 9 individual projects with a number. We've got a team of about 20 working on this across 2 major hospitals, the Women's and the Mercy, but the clinicians, and we've got 12 specialists, so advanced trained gynecologists involved running different projects, and a group of about 4 or 5 scientists, including collaborators around the country, working on more fundamental science behind the projects. Sorry, I've got a frog in my throat there.
No worries.
I'm very excited by it. I don't know, do you want me to dive into a couple? You know that once you start a scientist talking about their research, you're going to wake up in about a week's time and say, oh, that was interesting.
So can you just tell us what do you think the outcomes will be for women who are struggling with endometriosis?
Okay, outcomes. So one issue is that because endometriosis has to date often been treated surgically, it can be treated medically, so with like the pill and progesterone and other treatments, but it is also, I guess, mainly treated surgically at the moment. And so most of the definitions of the types of endometriosis and how severe it is from the perspective of a surgeon. And that may not necessarily correlate with the symptoms the woman feels or the risk of recurrence. So we're trying to use as much data. We have a big database of about 1,000 women who've come for surgery at the Royal Women's over the last 10 years that we are, digging deeper and deeper into to try and understand if we can get a better idea on the type of endometriosis they've got, or even if they've got it before they have surgery, and then what the risk is that they'll get it again. So and again, there's not good numbers on this, but up to half of the women who have surgery will get a recurrence of their endometriosis. And even though the surgeon says it wasn't very severe, they've got endometriosis again. As far as the woman's concerned, that's bloody severe. I mean, I was cured. My sister had it. She had one surgery. She was in the 50%, didn't get it again. And here I am stuck in hospital again 2 years later. So we're trying to understand if we can predict who actually needs surgery and who doesn't, and then who's going to get it again and who won't, and what we can do about that if we can then predict whether they're going to get it or not. So a lot of work on diagnosis and understanding the risk you have of recurrence, and then providing better treatment options. We've also got a couple of projects looking at trying to reduce the pain for women who actually have endo. One project which is, I think, particularly exciting or different, we've got a world-class physiotherapist who specialises in chronic pelvic pain, Helena Frawley, who's got some really novel methods of looking at pelvic muscle tenderness and sensitivity to pressure and to muscle tone as well, because again, there's no data on what percentage of women with chronic pelvic pain actually have issues with pelvic muscle floor tone and tenderness and pain. So we've got work on that. And then finally, the other big symptom, fertility, we've got a couple of big projects trying to work out what the influence of endometriosis is on the ovary and particularly, I guess, the oocytes. So women who have problem conceiving, who go to IVF, the quality of their oocytes is really important, and knowing what to do in terms of treatments. So more surgery can damage the ovary, but not taking the endometriosis out can also damage the ovary. So you're caught. So which way do we head with that one? And ultimately what the long-term outcomes for women are with endometriosis in terms of their fertility. So we're actually attacking most of the life story of endometriosis with one or more of these projects.
Wow. I mean, it's really just so encouraging, I'm sure, for women who suffer from this debilitating disease to know that at least finally they're being heard and they're valid, that their issues are important enough to actually have some funding put into it.
I've got one more question.
Yeah. Sorry, yes, Ange.
Oh, yeah, go, Ange.
What, does it run in families?
Absolutely. There is a genetic component. I suppose to talk in sort of technical terms, everything that we are is molded by two things: our what we inherit, our genetics, and the environment we live in. And roughly speaking, with endometriosis, we understand that about half of the risk that a woman carries of having endometriosis, she inherits from her parents, and the other half comes from what she does, her environment. We actually are starting to crack open a bit more the genetics, but it's not helping to the extent that as of yet, even though we now know a number of the genes, I guess, that are involved, they haven't led, or this knowledge hasn't led to better treatment. So there's still a lot more lab work to do before we come up with anything. And we're even more bemused, I guess, by environmental factors. We don't know what it is that increases your risk of endometriosis. I mean, we do know that women that menstruate more, so have shorter cycles and more periods, have a higher risk of endometriosis, which fits in with the whole theory of cells from the menstrual fluid going back up the fallopian tube into the abdomen and causing endometriosis. But we're much closer to the start of this journey than the end. Can I just say one thing though, that all of this has happened because of advocacy by women for women. Yes, once they'd breached, made the political inroads, then the research community and the clinical community was asked to do something about it. Here's our action plan now, get off your bums and do something, so we then turn around and say, we will, but we need funding to do that. And the government said, yes, here's the funding. But it all started because of advocacy. And I think it's really important to understand that, and that all women and all of society needs to understand that if we don't advocate for the things that are important, they won't happen.
Pete, thanks so much for making that point too, because I want to acknowledge the incredible courage of the women who are already facing a disease that is so debilitating, exhausting, agonising, isolating, and still fighting for advocacy for them and every other woman who experiences it. I think that's definitely something worth acknowledging, and wow, we applaud those women for the incredible work that they've put into it.
And often with endometriosis, they're women who are perhaps some of the worst affected. So that it is a real commitment, because I think anybody that suffers from chronic pain knows that sometimes even just getting out of bed's a problem.
Yeah, wow. Well, Professor Peter Rogers, with all your thousands of hats, from Gene Howes for Women's Health and Director of Research at the Royal Women's Hospital in Melbourne and Professor of Women's Health Research at University of Melbourne, thanks so much for joining us on Broad Radio.
It's been my pleasure. Thanks, Jo. Thanks, Ange.
Thanks. We'll have more Broad Radio after this. At Broad Radio, we believe in caring for each other, for ourselves and the planet. That's why we're so pleased to be partnering with Saba Organics, one of the world's only 100% certified organic range of skin and body care. Whether it's hand wash, hand sanitizer or cleaning products for our home, none of us want to be covering our skin in toxins or chemicals, obviously, but how do we really know what goes into the products we use? Well, I've only just learned that even what's described as natural ingredients have actually been usually exposed to toxic herbicides and pesticides in farming, which is then damaging to the earth and of course our body. So having just learned that, I understand the importance of something that is 100% certified organic, which is exactly what Saba Organics is. It guarantees no aluminium, no sulfate or parabens and no toxic chemicals. And they work directly with Australian organic farmers, growers and suppliers so they can offer the most accessible certified organics at the lowest prices. I love the Saba Organics lemon, tea tree and kunzia hand wash, but you can check out their whole range at sabaorganics.com.
In your arena, there's only one race to win, your own. You never stop, never quit, never look back. You push and test your limits until there are none left. Fuel your performance with INC Dynamic Way to keep you going.
Broad Radio, talking inspo we love, info we need, and sharing more of us. Watch and listen live every Tuesday 9 a.m. Australian Eastern Daylight Savings Time at broadradio.com.au or find us on Facebook, Twitter, YouTube and LinkedIn at Broad Radio Oz. Talk to us live. Call on 1300 8 Broad. Catch up on demand anytime, anywhere, every time, everywhere. On the train, we'll be here. 2 a.m. existential crisis? We've got you covered. Broad Radio. Here for more.
Well, Ange, if people have wondered if Broad Radio is just a thinly veiled ploy for me to have a gas bag with the ladies that I love in my life, they could absolutely be correct in assuming that. And this next woman is a prime example of that. She's founder and CEO of Sheba, the female-only rideshare, hugely successful as an entrepreneur. She's a super funny comedian and a great mate of mine. I love her dearly. George McEncrow, good morning, darling.
Hello, two of my favourite Petes in the world. Oh, I just want to get a little doona and pull out the coffee or the rum or whatever. The rum's a bit rich, isn't it? I don't know. Not on a boat or something. Anyhow, how are you guys?
Oh, we're really well, darling. Hey, we've got lots to talk to you about. I have to do, the first thing that people always want to know about as you as an entrepreneur and a founder of an extremely successful business, Sheba Rideshare. What led you down that path to be so courageous?
desperation, missing out on a job on 774. No, well, that. But I think, like, I really needed to do something to get a house. So I don't know if you've noticed with this budget, I've been just in a lot of white hot rage of turning myself into butter, walking around a tree of frustration. But when you get divorced, you'll notice that a lot of women get shafted because you don't get money while you raise your children, and you don't get superannuation. And then if you split up, you get like a little bit more of a percentage of the family property, but that's it. And then you go to the bank and they won't give you any money because you don't have a career as such, and you've got these wonderful children, but the banks see them as a liability, strangely enough, and not an asset. And you've still got to house them. And then they go, and how many more years of child support are you going to get? And of course, after kids turn 18, their father doesn't need to support them anymore because, you know, they are fully funding themselves at 18, as we understand. They all go and work full time while they study at university and buy their own cars, which is great, which is obviously what everyone understands to be the case. And another thing people don't understand too is if the father of a child goes and has more children, the court doesn't say, oh, now you've got to add more child support to the children. They say, no, this is like one Mars bar, and you just slice it further and further into smaller pieces. So if you are unfortunate enough to divorce a man who goes on to have, say, 5 more children, and you had 3, his wage now gets divided into 8 slices. And the court says that's a fair and reasonable thing, even though you can explain to an 8-year-old that you can only afford to keep 1 puppy. You can't explain to a 58-year-old that he can only afford to have 3 children. So anyway, it all sounds fair and reasonable in the eyes of the people who first legislated those things. But it didn't sound fair and reasonable that you could make childcare tax deductible. So blow me down with a feather. Women who are 50 to 65 find themselves short of coin. And I thought, wouldn't it be amazing if I could enable women to keep themselves employed by monetising some of their, labour while they're at home looking after children, and help with some of the logistics by creating a service, and stop women being sexually assaulted in cars when they are travelling around, because that happens with, all too much frequency. So with that in mind, I went about building an app, bringing in the washing, cooking tea, cleaning up the dog shit, and there we go. That's what I did. Here it is. Here we go. Have a crack. So, yeah, that's what I did. I'm in a bit of a cranky mood. That budget's really had me freaking out. Maybe it put me in a bad mood for about 4 days.
What particular about it has made you cranky?
Oh, this idea of doing things. Like, I was excited by the childcare thing. Then I saw it's not going to happen. Not that any of it would help me now, right? But, even still, I employ so many women for whom childcare eats up 90% of their wage. But I keep saying to them, stay in it, because stay in your career, because should it all go belly up, having this ongoing career will be the thing that saves you in life. But, it's going to be a pittance of a reduction. It's not, the childcare centres will eat up whatever benefit comes from this addition, because childcare workers are paid so little, and it doesn't happen until 2022 anyway. Just so many things about it that just, it's going to give a veneer of doing something when it's not really adequate. So, yeah, I've just had a very inarticulate tantrum there. But however, that's what tantrums are like, isn't it? When you're so full of things you want to say, you just get like, and then, yeah. So,
I'm gonna sit down and watch and listen tonight. I want to see what they're doing about violence against women and homelessness for so many women, and they haven't been able to find a gendered lens in the past. Let's hope somebody at the big house in Canberra has found the gendered lens and can look at this and look at it properly, because it's an epidemic. It is destroying so many lives, and I'm just, the lack of leadership is what really gets me. So I'll be very interested to see what comes of that tonight.
But they're all sort of I see them as integrated as well, Ange. Like the violence by way of omission of services and, lack of financial independence is a form of violence, because it creates a dependency that leads to terrible structural power imbalances within the family home, which is absolutely the breeding ground for family violence. So financial dependency creates a power imbalance, which creates, that they're all part and parcel. So when you say women don't matter, you are creating a perfect storm. And we know that by looking at other countries that do these things really well. Pay parity, family leave, not presuming that it will only be women who look after children. So we've got, and this sort of scratching of the head, like, oh, if only we had some research on how to manage these things. Like every time a woman is murdered, we act as though there's just no solution or signs that this could be a foreseeable. And that also does my head in, because there is so much research and so much understanding. And yes, childcare, yes, paid leave, yes, increased, it's the culture in which these things are bred. And, Ken Lay even said to me years ago that the lack of female presence in media was a contributing factor to violence against women, because an absence of women's voices and opinions is another way of saying women don't matter. And if men matter more than women, it is absolutely the license that you need as an abusive mindset to hurt, admonish, diminish, abuse, control.
Yep.
So it's all part and parcel, right? And this government's lack of a gendered lens is saying we don't have to think of things through your eyes. You kind of don't as much as the boys. So
it's. I can see while you're circling the Hills Hoist in rage.
Because you can see it so clearly from the outside, and you want to get there and say, "Guys, what are you doing, man?
Yeah,
what are you doing?"
And also with the events of this year, what we've seen in Canberra, I mean, the Prime Minister and others have had the perfect platform to talk about this properly. What else has to happen for that to go, oh, this is a very important issue in our country at the moment? And he didn't step out to the march, and he didn't take the opportunity to lead. And I'm still angry.
I am too. And he also had within his own party a time where he didn't have to be talking about putting a budget into surplus. He had a checkbook writing opportunity where for once, I know they have to campaign on surpluses. And in this period of, a capacity to say we're going to have to take the surplus off the political, agenda, we can write checks. One of the main things we're going to do with this opportunity is write checks that have women and safety, even if he had to use the fact that domestic violence is the biggest reason police resources are dedicated to. Even if you have to use an economic basis for it, let alone a human basis for it, he could have justified it if he gave two hoots. So it is heartbreaking in that sense. That's what's hard to get past.
It's enraging, and it doesn't feel nice to be
happy days.
Well, it doesn't feel nice to be powerless and to feel powerless and ignored. But we're not powerless. There's a big movement of us. working together
There is that
to really shift this. I want to say thank you to Natasha on Facebook, who's agreeing with you there, George. She's saying, so true, George, all part and parcel for perfect storm when women's services are ignored. I also want to acknowledge you, George, as a single mother of 4 who I was raised by a single mum, and single mothers are just not acknowledged for the work that they put in and how little support is actually out there for you. So, and particularly in the instance of even the childcare overhaul that we're hearing, if you've got one child, bad luck, there's nothing for you in that. So, I mean, there are so many loopholes. It's like, you need a law degree to work out whether you're going to benefit or not. But George, in as much as we're gas bagging a lot and we're going to run out of time, but I want to raise the fact that you do now have adult children living with you, and that has presented its own issues for you.
They hate me so much.
You what?
They don't. They're great, but they don't spare. They don't pull any punches, right? So I've gone from having 4 kids who, used to gather outside the toilet door and say, "Good boy, mummy," when I had a poo. To having 4 kids, so they had 4 under 5. I don't know why, and then they sort of all moved through as a pack, and they're all really good friends. And now they sort of form their own little council, little bunch of senators who monitor my behaviour. They have their own Facebook group and Snapchats, and how mad is she today, which is probably and I get little boards, I get little committees and advisory, notes. So I'm down to 2 now, but I was devastated when the first 2 moved out. Like during COVID, it was bizarre. I had 9 people in my house. I had sort of my foster daughter and my 4 kids and their partners. So I was living in a commune of people who hated me. And then they all moved out, bar 2. And so now I've just got my 2, I'm calling them favourites because they're the ones I share with. And it's just amazing that they can leave Weet-Bix in a bowl still and literally walk past it all day. And all their mandarin peel, really carefully peeled and stacked up like this in little cup upon cup. So neat, so much effort, can't put it in the bin. And I can't tell you how much I want to drive to where they're studying and throw it at their heads and just in front of all their friends, just carefully, like piece by piece by piece. Like 30 seconds. I'm not doing that.
And look, I belong to the put things where they belong society, but it hasn't taken off in my house. The other 2 don't do it, and I'm kind of sick of doing it. So I'm thinking of just giving up and putting stuff anywhere, just to prove the point of how difficult life is going to be if none of us know where stuff is.
You want to know where your stuff is, right? Like your car keys, your wallet, like where the internet connection is, because their friends will come over and go, "Oh, how do I log on to?" I want to hide things like that, things that will have revenge, the remote controls to, how they get online and kill people in their spare time. What are those things called? They're games.
Yes.
Sometimes I around and watch me texting with one finger, just laughing and laughing.
You know what? I put this on my Facebook yesterday, George, and I was surprised how many households have functioning adults who contribute evenly to the chores in the household.
Oh,
I know.
Well, that's it. I'm even more cranky.
I don't know how they manage it. I did get one beautiful woman, though, who said, my son is 18 and I've told him if I hear him having sex, he will in turn hear me having sex with his dad.
That's good. Hats off. Oh, but to really mess with him, she should make him hear her having sex with someone else's dad. That's the key. That's the equivalent.
Oh,
that is funny. And George, have you had a child move into state, or are they just moved out of the house?
One in Canberra. Right. He's gone to ANU because he's better than us. So that's good. He's gone. His law degree in Melbourne wasn't quite sufficient. So no, he's off in Canberra. So we give him a bit of stick about being up himself. That's because we all feel a bit inferior. And so he's up there. He came back for Mother's Day, gave me a little bit of a 360 about the ways in which I could improve my behaviour.
Helpful.
So cool. Yeah, appreciate that. Thanks, buddy. Glad I paid for the airfare. But back you go. Here's your hat. Watch your nose. So that was nice. But look, it's good that he's there. One less person to feed. My daughter's great. Like she does the emotional labour things, like buying the card. So I can see that she'll be unhappy in 20 years when she's in an office job and is unpacking the dishwasher and writing passive-aggressive notes on the fridge. That's kind of the perennial genetics.
That's where we end up.
It is. George, it's been gorgeous as ever to speak with you. And I do want to mention, because you've mentioned this to me, that you need drivers for Sheba.
We so need drivers. We have so much demand at the moment for people wanting to use the service, so many kids. So one of the big pluses with the service is you can bring your own kids in the car to drive with. You can have a car of any age. You can make around about $1,000 a week. And we have you can call, get help to, upload your documents. You do need some documentation. The one thing you do need that you don't need for anything else is a working with children check, because we're the only service that takes minors. So, get a car seat if you want. You don't have to, but you make really good coin if you've got a car seat. So, and you can take all your trips in advance if you want as well. So you don't have to drive around the streets cruising, unless that's your thing. That's how I do it. I drive as well. So, we'd love to see you at Sheba.
Yeah, amazing. So the website is there on the screen, but you just go to sheba.com.au/drive. Awesome to see you again, George. We'll have you again some other time.
I feel better. I've had therapy.
That's it. That's what we're here for.
Much cheaper.
Yes.
Namaste, ladies.
Namaste, darling. And all the best with the budget, Rage. Okay. Lovely to see you. We'll have more Broad Radio after this. So, Ange, one of the things I have absolutely loved about Broad Radio is meeting, learning from and chatting with our brilliant listeners. And the woman we're about to meet has been one of our very first listeners. She jumped on board Broad Radio really early. So we love her already, right?
Yes.
But she's so fascinating. I've spoken with her before on the phone. We've just been catching up. She's a funeral director and has written a book designed to help us prepare for and talk about our own death. Her name is Bronwyn Jackson. Hi there, Bronnie.
Good morning.
It's so lovely to see you. Thanks again for joining us right back when we first started as one of our first listeners.
Thank you for inviting me on today.
So, death is something that most of us avoid thinking about. I certainly have to say I'm not good at thinking about it. But you're a funeral director, so you work with it, you face it, you sort of manage people who are handling the loss of someone dear to them every day. What is that like for you?
Very rewarding. It's probably the most rewarding job you can have, to help someone at that particular time when they need you the most. So to be able to make sure everything runs along smoothly, you deal with them with empathy and sympathise with them. And the reason why I wrote the book, I just found that there was a lot of stress with people that didn't have the information. And so I wanted to create something that empowered and educated the community and individuals to help their families. We talk about wills, which is end of life, but, I just wanted to open the conversation for death and what you actually need and how to make it easier for your family.
And there's some funny stuff in the book as well. There's some light-hearted stuff. It's not all sort of, dour and depressing. What sort of observations, did you make when, during your time, and how are they in the book? You talk about choice of music and sort of how people want to be remembered. What's in the book?
Yeah, so the first part is all the information you need for births, deaths and marriages. And sometimes that can be really difficult to try and find. So my dad passed in October, and to try and find his mother's maiden name is that if you didn't know or have it written down, they may sound sort of quite easy, but they're things that aren't. You have to find, marriage certificates and those type of things. But the second part's a bit more, let's have a bit of fun. So, and it's to be able to create a eulogy, but also just to be able to pass on to the next generation about how unique your life really was, all the things that you enjoyed, your, quotes, your favourite quotes and songs and favourite food. And I think the following generations would love to have something like that. So for my grandchildren, I'm sure they'd like to know what things were like in my day. Hopefully it'll be a long time before I pass over, but they're all wonderful things. There's a place for a photograph and dried flowers and a little memorial book. So in COVID, it was very difficult. And like my dad, my children couldn't go. So we're having a memorial later. So with that, you can write down the people's names. I'll probably be a bit cheeky when I've got mine. I've got mine written out. I've got my name up the top. So, because obviously I'll be there. So it's all a bit, you can do it in your own privacy, which I really wanted people to be able to have. And now I've created a forum on Facebook. So people are just so fascinated if you're a funeral director, and there's so many questions out there that they really would like to have answered. And there really is nowhere for them to go. So I thought if I created a forum, they could ask me questions and I can answer that for them.
What's one of the most common questions you get asked as a funeral director?
Well, what you actually need, what it's like being a funeral director, just people that I've spoken with. I did a little business course and the lady that was running it said, oh my goodness, that's just the best idea. Can I purchase one of your books? And I went and saw her and she said, would my mother have been in the coffin when we had a viewing? And I said, oh, absolutely. Probably the main thing people ask is it just your ashes? Is there only one person that goes in at that time? And that's definitely true. It is. I think back in the day, the concept, of a funeral director probably wasn't a very kind one. It was a bit like people say about real estate agents and car salesmen, but these, everybody's just so wonderful. I mean, we do this job because we are empathetic people that would like to be able to, help the community as such. So, and that was my main aim in writing the book.
Bronwyn, the thing I really love about the book is that it makes you think about your own life and really kind of assess what have I lived for? What are the things that I've really found joyous? Who actually am I? Which is a hard thing to really think about. But what do you hope people are able to impart to their families from this book?
Oh, just how unique their life was. We're all unique in our own way. And there's lots of things that we don't write down that we don't tell our children. It's like I won state swimming when I was younger. There's lots of little things that I didn't even know about my dad, but my brother told me. So if you've got those written down, my dad was a great wrestler on North Stradbroke Island back in his day. I didn't know, and sometimes our parents may tell one sibling, but they may not tell the other. So they're all little things that you can write down about how beautiful your life was, and your children and grandchildren, they're going to know, even as in different foods that you like, or do you like a glass of wine, or, you can even write down some, health issues that you've had. There's space there to write that, which is really important, as of your first guest today, and, I know with myself and my children. So, there's spaces there that's going to really help the following generations, as well as having all your account details, your passwords. Obviously you give that to them, the people that you trust the most, but it's just really difficult at that time when you've got to try and source that information when you really should be supporting each other and under that stressful condition. You don't need to be looking through paperwork. It's just an easy way to do it. Your passwords, your account, your telephone account has all the provision there to write the phone number for people. So all they have to do is pick up the phone instead of fossicking through paperwork.
And
it's an
passing down
empowering
stories. Yes,
Yes.
it is. Storytelling is so important, passing down stories through the generations. It means a lot to me, and I know it means a lot to people, but because our lives are so fast paced and there's so much technology now interfering with our lives, that art of storytelling has been lost a bit, hasn't it? So this is really important because it provides the structure for people to pass the story down.
That's right, and it's a tangible thing, it's a book, so children can hold it, your grandchildren can hold it, they can flick through, and it's all there with a nice photograph of yourself. And so I just wanted something tangible. I think we live in a very internet controlled world, but I really wanted something that, you could hold on to and pass down. So, and that's your story, it is your story.
It's fantastic to have that thing that you can say to your relatives. It's on this shelf when you need it. Just go straight there. Everything's there in that book. So head to mycircleoflife.com.au to pick up that book. And I should mention, while you're there online, it is critical to have a will. And one of our partners, Maurice Blackburn Lawyers, is actually offering Broad Radio listeners a 30% discount on their My Life Wills online service, which means you can get your will written by a lawyer and you don't even have to leave your house, which I just love. So check that out as well, and we thank Maurice Blackburn for that. I have one last question for you, Bronnie, as a funeral director. Can you help people like Ange and I? How can we approach the subject of death, and specifically our own, in a way that is perhaps healthier and not so full of fear?
Well, I think that's the thing, Jo, Ange. I think it's just a matter of opening the conversation. So making it so it's not fearful. And once you do start talking about, it's like talking about your will. So once you start talking about these things, the conversation, people generally become a little bit more accustomed to it. And that's the problem that we've had, is that we don't open the conversation. But you would be very surprised how many questions people have, or once you do open the conversation, they will actually want to have some input into that. So I think it's just gently. It's not something that's, you can do it over a dinner party, but you know what I mean. It's just something that you have to take your time with, and you have to make sure the other person's comfortable with that too. So if you're sort of on the same wavelength, just gently. That's all we can do to open the conversation. But I hope people would join me on my Facebook page too. And if they have any questions that they'd like answered, they can private message me and I'll be going on. I've just started, so I'll be going on live just to answer the questions that people have.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Bronwyn. It's been lovely to speak with you, and check out mycircleoflife.com.au.
Thanks, Jo. Thanks, Ange. Have a great day.
Thanks, Bronnie.
Thanks for joining us on Broad Radio. We'll have more Broad Radio after this. Well, that's been our show today, Ange. I just want to mention, I don't think either of us would need to write down in a book that we liked wine for our children to know that we liked wine.
Yes, that's a given. I did hear you chuckle when Bronnie mentioned wine.
It's like, do you know what I got for Mother's Day? I got 4 beautiful glasses, martini glasses with a spectacular bottle of gin from my daughter.
Fantastic.
I mean, she didn't need to ask what I would like.
No. But, I'm a reluctant talker about death. I don't really want to talk about it, but I'm being forced to, because Francis, who is 8, as you know, he's quite fascinated by death. And, if he hears a snippet on the news, he wants to have that conversation, about the all the details involved in someone's death. Oh, wow. So I'm, being sort of drawn into that world. And of course, he wants to know about heaven.
And
is it real? Heaven? I said, I have no idea. I said, look, there's no evidence. I've seen no evidence. No one's come back to talk to me. But, that's something that he will, figure out in time. But it's unknown. It's unknown, and I don't have a strong religious sort of footing as well. So it's tricky.
I tell you what, you've brought up a very serious topic at 10:04 when usually we'd be wrapping the show right now.
Sorry, everybody.
What do we do? For the record, I do believe in afterlife and in heaven. So that's for something for us to talk about at another date.
Put it in the diary.
Oh,
That's
wow.
another topic.
That's big. Okay. Well, Ange, as always, it's been a true delight to have you on Broad Radio. I do adore our time together. We'll be seeing each other again soon.
Very soon, I hope. See you,
Okay.
Joe. Bye, everyone.
More Broad Radio next week.